What are you 100 sure is true even though you can't prove it? Story 1. There is one road, a block from my house, that Google Maps has never ever recognized as a viable way to travel, despite it being the obvious solution to anyone in our neighborhood who needs to move out in that direction. I suspect a Google sub-founder lives in the area and pulled some strings to reduce traffic on the street. Answer: is it a road with particularly nice houses? Once when I was bored, I'd go on property websites and have a gander at the fancier houses by sorting by highest price. A particular area, just outside of the city I was living, had a few mansions up for sale. When I put the address into Google Maps, nothing. Whole collection of streets with no street view. Don't know if maps wouldn't route you down those streets, but I can believe it. Story 2. Pretty sure my granddad was involved with smuggling, the mob, something. Dock worker in the 50s, 60s. Didn't let his wife visit him at work. Gave her some really nice ivory earrings and other less than legal items. Can't prove it. He died before I was born. Edit. Also wore a suit every day. As a dock worker, my mom also told me that he would always walk so that the wind wouldn't mess up his hair, so seems pretty on brand for mobster of some kind. Answer: I had a neighbor when I was 10, late 80s, that worked at the Long Beach shipyard, supposedly as a crane operator. He and his wife, a model half his age, would go to Vegas every 5 to 6 weeks and always came back with big jackpot wins. I would take care of their 2 huge Rottweilers when they were gone. A few times when they'd return, he'd flash me a briefcase full of banded stacks of hundreds and tell me it was a 20 or 30 grand jackpot win on slots. As an adult, I've been to Vegas. Nobody wins like that, ever. Nor do any dock workers get weeks of time off every month. They would take me out to dinners at restaurants filled with cigar smoke and old men in suits with young women by their side, or whale watching on his big jerk speedboat, the Razzmatazz, around Catalina. Vibe booths at the racetrack, and a few major league games. It was an experience, for better or worse, that I still appreciate having. It was a stark contrast from the life I lived at home. Story 3. This is recent, but I'm 100 sure my brother, who was unresponsive and in a coma on life support, recognized my voice when I spoke to him. My brother passed away 2 weeks ago from a brain aneurysm. He was in the hospital for a month prior with a blood infection, but was doing better and was sent home. The first night back, he woke in the middle of the night with a horrible headache. His longtime girlfriend called the ambulance, and he was unresponsive by the time he got to the hospital. They put him on life support pretty soon thereafter. My parents called to let me know around 10 a.m. that morning, and due to distance travel, I didn't get to the hospital until the following morning, around 10 a.m. I went back to see him in the ICU, where he was completely still and looked asleep. The first words I said in a soft tone were, "Hey man, it's your brother." Immediately, he reacted to my voice by what appeared to me to be gasping for air and lifting his chin up very noticeably. So much so that I said to him, "Calm down, brother. You're okay. You're okay." It only lasted about 5 seconds, which felt like a minute. And the rest of the day at his bedside, there were not any reactions to that degree, besides some involuntary small movements that are more typical when people are on life support. My sister was not able to be there, but I put her on speakerphone so she could say goodbye. My mom and dad came in and talked to him, his girlfriend, nurses, but no reactions. Over the past couple of weeks since his passing, I've read medical papers about sound being the last sense to leave you prior to dying. I've also read about theories on consciousness near passing and other people's experiences similar to mine. I know for a fact he recognized my voice and knew I was there with him, regardless of any contrary explanations I read or am told. My brother and I, regrettably, had a falling out about 10 years ago, and despite a few texts between us, only spoke once during that period. A regret I will always carry with me. He was a good brother and I love him very much. Answer: my mom was in a coma for almost a month at one point, about a year before she eventually passed, and despite not responding to anyone else, whenever my dad or I would grab her hand and talk to her, she would squeeze it very noticeably. She never did that any other times from what we know. When she awoke and we asked her about it, she didn't remember anything at all, but I absolutely believe she heard and was aware of us. And I'm sure your brother was aware of you too. So sorry for your loss. Story 4. My own conspiracy theory. In the UK, we have a vast overpopulation of traffic cones. They don't know where to store them all, so they just randomly put them on a road for a couple weeks, then move them to a different road with no works actually being done. Answer: I often think about the logistics behind large-scale projects, not so much the massive amount of energy needed to, say, rebuild a bridge or add a new lane to 30 miles of highway. I think about how there are people whose entire job is managing a warehouse of road cones for a large enough entity. Like, a couple dozen road cones for a smaller utility or construction company isn't that big of a deal. But a state road department or a company that works in multiple states with multiple crews, surely they have somebody keeping track of a massive amount of of cones. We had construction on the interstate recently, and there were cones out, maybe 15 feet apart, for maybe 30 miles. That's north of 10K cones. Somebody has to be nearly paid full-time to ensure they get out, stored, inventoried, and replaced when necessary. It's a spreadsheet I'd love to get a look at someday. Story 5. Netflix included a lot of smoking for their characters as advertisement for the tobacco industry, since tobacco is heavily restricted on how they can advertise. Answer: in some countries, the media can't even portray tobacco use. Smoking scenes edited out. There was even a British show I saw where in the original, the camera faded up from black and we see a few seconds of two characters smoking before the third guy walks in. The same show on Netflix cuts the smoking, instead fading up the moment the third character walks in. Story 6. I have this strong belief that small acts of generosity can create ripples of positivity in ways we might never see. Answer: I read a Buddhist book about this once. It went that the universe is inherently full of suffering, so if one perpetuates suffering, then nothing changes. If one does nothing to prevent or limit the suffering, then nothing changes. But if one does good, something changes. And good actions actually compound at an exponential rate because of their rarity, because of the energy it takes to fight the natural state of things. It was an interesting book, existential fart, people of the word, with love, care, and respect. That's why I became a waiter. Story 7. In grade 6, Kevin stole 10 out of my locker. No one was ever brought to justice for this heinous crime, but I know it was that little prick Kevin. Story 8. I believe that kindness you give out eventually comes back to you in some way, even if it takes years. Story 9. I'm convinced my papa smoked a pipe. I can picture it vividly in my mind. My mom, Papa's daughter, aunts and uncles and cousins say he didn't. I am the only one that remembers this. It's like he only smoked his pipe around me, and the rest of the time he smoked cigarettes. This is a hill I will die on. Story 10. There's no unified cabal. We are ruled by incompetent, inbred, perverted buffoons propped by the inertia of the system that is maintained by opportunistic barnacles. These people are too egotistical to maintain an Illuminati-like unity. Answer: I have seen good, intelligent, well-organized people attempt to run a committee of just a few people and be unable to get things done effectively. The chances of doing this decrease almost exponentially the more people there are, and double losses if a lot of money's involved. This is why I don't believe in things like the Illuminati, alien contact, or faking the moon landings. Humans aren't that good keeping secrets. Story 11. The moon landing was 100 real and the footage we see is real. And of that moon landing, not taking away anything from the heroes on the mission and in the control room or anything like that. But I am 100% convinced that the live transmissions and newscasts were delayed to make sure that there was no screw-ups. Answer: the conspiracy theory I heard was that they filmed a fake landing to save face in the event of the real mission going wrong, which is utter nonsense. The White House even declassified papers which showed how Nixon would have responded to a failure or disaster, including an address to the nation. And if there was any hint whatsoever of fakery, then the USSR would have been on it like a measles rash. Guess what? They weren't. It happened. It was real. I am somewhat surprised that we haven't really been back since, given technology is a lot better and there's more to discover. Although I guess we don't really need to send humans precisely because the tech is better. Story 12. The RTO, Return to Office push, is because shareholders are losing money on the stock market, not from the company they own shares in, but in investments in real estate, with most employees being remote office retail space value plummeted. So instead of doing the right thing, these rich bastards pressure companies they partially controlled to have workers to return to the office to boost their earnings. Let me work remote, damn it. Answer: I've been told in some cases it's used as a shareholder-friendly way to call their workforce. A company may want to lay off a bunch of people to make profit number go up. However, mass layoffs are often a public affair and a sign a company is performing poorly and thus bad for the stock price. So instead, a RTO push will inevitably result in a bunch of people quitting, which is much quieter and less likely to impact the stock price, thus achieving the same goal as a mass layoff. Story 13. Tom Cruise wants to leave the church, but is so far into Scientology, he knows there is no way out, and his finances are tied to the church, and he can't leave anything to his kids. So he is trying to eliminate himself via movie stunt, so a life insurance payout goes to his family. Answer: I don't think that's true. Tom Cruise is seen like a god in Scientology and has so much power, too much power and admiration to just give up. To say he's trying to eliminate himself doing stunts for life insurance is also absolutely ridiculous. The guy is just an adrenaline junkie, and he gets his fix by doing the most ridiculous and dangerous stunts. I believe what you're saying for John Travolta is true, though. Story 14. Cats know if you are sick with cancer. If it wasn't for my cat's strange behavior, I wouldn't have gotten checked. Answer: my mom had to have a hysterectomy because she was bleeding so much. About 2 days before the surgery, our Maine Coon goes absolutely ballistic on my mom's lower abdomen, kneading, shoving her face into mom's stomach, and just generally acting weird. We didn't find out until after the surgery that one of her ovaries was trying to strangle the other and had gone necrotic in the process. Doctors said they'd never seen anything like it, and if they'd waited any longer, it probably would have eliminated her. Story 15. Psych operations on social media from foreign countries using social media to attempt to destroy the U.S. from within. I know I sounds like a radical conservative, but trust me, I'm not LOL. Answer: dude, there's literally proof of this. It's not right-wing at all. In the U.S. and all across the world, people on the right are starting to shift their opinion towards Russia is nice. In Canada, it basically shown that all parties had candidates who were compromised, and the pro-Trump right-wing party's leader, Pierre Poilievre, refused to pass a security background check, which prompted the whole country to freak out. He was projected to win by a landslide. He lost. Canada's Foreign Interference Commission, and you want to know one of the reasons why? This is even more fudge up than you can imagine. As the Arctic is melting, a new trade route is opening up. Russia has territory on half of its shores. China has claimed itself half-Arctic nation. There used to be an Arctic Council of all countries who are bordering the Arctic, but no more. It was disbanded when Russia declared war with Ukraine. Trump's weird obsession with Canada? Yes. From CBC, Canada's public broadcasting, as beige and informational as you can get, not some obscure woo-woo thing. Canada's former Minister of Foreign Affairs and representative for Canada in the Arctic Council. It's not a conspiracy. It's the truth. Story 16. Aliens exist somewhere out there in our vast universe. There are likely some in our galaxy. Life can't have happened only once in such a mind-bogglingly vast space. Answer: due to the sheer size and scale of the universe, probability almost guarantees there is abundant alien life in the cosmos. But also due to the sheer and scale of the universe, it's likely that we will never encounter or even become aware of it. There could be billions of planets out there with alien life, and it's possible that none of them will ever discover one another. Story 17. If God exists, the first people God will punish are the leaders of every organized religion for falsely claiming a special connection with God solely for the purpose of gaining power and money, because no such connection ever existed. Answer: 100. I have seen some things I was horrified by while others seemed to think it was okay. Dated a kid whose father was a bishop in a Church of God in college, and he always bought stuff on the company. Trips to Hawaii, Dallas Cowboy tickets, trips to Disney World talking for his entire extended family. Also watched a homeless man give all the money to an offering plate, and everyone praised how great he was. I was sick knowing where it was going to go. I flat out refused to go back. It broke me, and I refused any travel with the family. Not surprisingly, we broke up. Taking from those who need the money when you don't have a need is just gross. Story 18. Fantasy sports was an intentional test preamble to online sports betting to get people hooked on caring about prop bets and having a stake in every single game. Story 19. I have no children. I have my mic turned off on my phone. I had my phone that had a dead battery in my back pocket. I'm at a party and a friend shared a story quietly just to me about a bedwetting issue she was navigating with her oldest in pee pads. The next day I charge my phone and I see adolescent bedwetting products on every web page. Additional info. This was in 2019. She did not have her phone in her, but it was at her home. I don't have the FB app on my phone. I have a group of 20-ish good friends. There are 8 dependents in the group. Hers are by far the youngest, by 10 years. Answer. There's so much data harvesting going on that companies like Facebook literally generate profiles on you, even if you've never signed up for it, and it's all based on what your friends do. Basically, a very simple version of this could have been something like this. Your friend Googled pee pads on their computer. Your friend has Hisher contacts shared with some apps so that app knows you exist. It doesn't know you exactly, but it knows your name, number, and possibly screen names for different services. Your friend connects to Wi-Fi. Your friend posts a picture to social media, and you're in while connected to Wi-Fi and tags you. Now the data collected links you to a location with that friend and the EXIF data on the photo, if it's not stripped, lets whatever is gathering data know you're together at the same time. That's a contrived example. Reality is much worse. Facebook, for example, collects around 530 data points on each user, probably more by now. All of that is harvested and cross-referenced and sold to data brokers and used to target ads in real time. Story 20. that there's people that just dislike on you for no good reason. They will outwardly be okay with you. Pleasant, but there's something just not right. They may not say anything bad, but they'll never hold you in any esteem either. Backhanded compliments, subtle lapses on social conduct, lean pretending not to hear you when you're speaking. You can't prove any of it, but you can feel it deep down. Answer, this isn't unproven, and we're all the hater at least once in our lives. I'm not proud of it, and I'm not saying this is how we should be, but you cannot tell me you've never looked at some rando and just disliked their stupid face. It's right there, right on the front of their stupid heads. It's a horrible instinct. I do my very best to talk myself down from that, but it's happened in life a few times for no good reason whatsoever. Story 21. A good chunk of human history that is claimed to have been lost or destroyed is actually in the bowels of the Vatican. Story 22. That my pets understand English, they just choose not to listen, especially the cat. She's fluent and rude. Story 23. That orangutans can really speak but choose not to out of fear of being forced to. I saw them. I always enjoyed this little legend. Story 24. One time I went to a river beach with my family. I was 10 years old, and I remember an Egyptian-like canoe with a dude dressed as a pharaoh and two other dudes as servants. I saw them. The pharaoh dude looked at me and waved, and for some weird reason, no one on my family remembers it. On the same day, my dad told me I saw the whole cosmology. P.S. I'm not Egyptian, and this happened in Portugal. Story 25. Lee Greenwood didn't write, "God bless the USA," aka proud to be an American. It was written by Steve Hallmark, who spent most of his life as a bookie in Oklahoma. I 100% know this is true because I've heard the original recording that was made in the late 1960s, and Steve told me how he sold the rights to the song when he was an aspiring singer. Here's the quick story. My sister briefly worked for him when she was in high school as his assistant, essentially a go-for decent pay as far as high school jobs go. She stayed in touch with him for a few years, and I would occasionally go over to his house when she would come back from college. One night we were over there hanging out before I headed off to college, where I thought I was going to study music and become a famous, or at least working, jazz musician. When I told Steve, he said, "Oh yeah, I'm a musician," and proceeded to pull out a few records of his, primarily a cappella four-man group. The name was something like the Four Freshmen, but of course he was not in the Four Freshmen. Anyway, it was the Four Something. One of the songs was "God Bless the USA," and I held the album cover in my hand and read the publishing date, which was sometime in the late 60s. He told me that he sold the song rights to Greenwood for something like $1,000. Unfortunately, Steve passed away in 2009 and may have been estranged from his family. I've looked and can't find any mention of him as a singer-songwriter and have come up empty, and am certain there are no more copies of that record to be found. I probably would have forgotten it if Lee Greenwood wouldn't continue to ride those coattails of a song he never wrote and peddle his fake patriotism to crowds at Mar-a-Lago. Edit, he played the song for us and we talked about the four-part harmonies he wrote for it. It was a cappella originally, which actually made it more interesting. Story 26. Purse companies pay women's jeans companies to put tiny pockets, or none at all, to sell more purses. Story 27. I believe 70 of violent crimes would end if we had robust mental health services that took cases seriously and handled the individuals with care, getting them on medication and preparing them for an independent and normal life, if at all possible. Look at practically every serial killer or mass murderer. They were crazy and did not get the help they desperately needed. If they had gotten help, perhaps what they did could have been avoided. Better to be proactive and help people struggling rather than to wait for them to snap and punish them for things that could have been avoided. Story 28. I think most flat earthers are really just trolls who like pushing buttons. I remember visiting the original Flat Earth Society website way back when not everybody was even online, and you could kind of tell it was set up by scientists simply as an exercise meant to challenge their peers to do better at making arguments and explaining scientific concepts better to the public. I believe what happened was a few gullible people thought it was real, and this did appeal to a number of people who believed in flat earth, but I think most people who claim they believe in a flat earth are, at this point, just trolling everybody, pushing everyone's buttons. I'm almost positive most of the flat earth groups on Facebook are just bait for engagement, and contributors who post content in support of flat earth are mostly part of the bait. Answer, I want to believe that, but anti-vaxxers are just as nuts as we know those are real. One of the fuckers runs Health and Human Services now. If that level of anti-intellectual blatant obvious stupidity and hatred can be real once, it can be real twice. I suspect it started that way. Some trolls trolling, but then people bought into it and it snowballed. Story 29, that our universe is not all that exists. It emerged from some kind of chaotic quantum field that probably contains many other universes. That would resolve some of the problems with understanding our own universe. But maybe I've been reading too much science fiction. Actually, I wouldn't put it at 100, but I think it's reasonably likely. Answer: the recent news about James Webb. The idea that our universe exists within a black hole is supported by recent research, particularly from the James Webb Space Telescope, JWST. Observations suggest that the vast majority of galaxies rotate in the same direction, indicating a preferred axis that aligns with black hole cosmology, which posits that the entire universe could be the interior of a black hole. This suggests that our universe might be a bubble within a larger multiverse, challenging existing theories about cosmic origins. However, some researchers caution that these findings are still preliminary and require further investigation to confirm the implications of this theory. Story 30. That some of our dreams are just little brief memories we still somehow have from a past life we experienced. Story 31. That my dead fiancé sends me signs of love from the other side. People say it's just my brain's way of coping, but some of the shoot is just way too wild for coincidence. Call me crazy, but I truly believe he's still with me. Answer: my grandpa lived 5 hours away from me. My mom told me that he was on the verge of passing way too late, and I planned on driving out there first thing in the morning to say my goodbyes. I woke up around 4 a.m. after having the most vivid dream of my life, where I sat down and he held my hands and said goodbye and we talked. When I woke up, I could still feel the way his hands had felt in mine. A few hours later, I found out that he had passed around the time I woke up. I'm really convinced that he came and said goodbye to me. Story 32. There is way more work done by governments, police keeping the rich alive and free than there is supporting any of us. I have had 3 break-ins to my apartment over my lifetime, and each time the police have done diddly shoot. Yet when someone shoplifts a 5-item and the dollar store in the mall calls, it's all hands on deck. It's stupid. Story 33. That most people who went to Epstein's island did it not for the intimacy, but because he was laundering their money, including Mr. T. Consider this. No one really knows where Epstein got his money. Story 34. The human race will never physically meet an intelligent alien race. I'm not happy about it, it's just physics. Without wormhole warp, teleportation, or cryo travel, it's not happening. Story 35. There's more to the Las Vegas shooting than what was let on. One guy shooting 8 different guns with video that makes it sound like talking guns. No one saw him bringing or was suspicious of all the guns and ammo he toted in the hotel. He got through the hurricane glass. His house inexplicably burns down basically the next day. No reason or rhyme for the crime. His brother says he would never do this. And all of a sudden, there's child-adult content found on a computer that runs Windows 98, I think it is. The brother is shut up, and the investigation into him goes nowhere. Something doesn't add up. Answer: I have stayed at Mandalay Bay many times. As long as the guns were brought to the room in luggage duffel bags, no one is going to question anything in that hotel. Short of your luggage moving on its own and the sound of a gagged person screaming inside it, everyone is too busy in their own world to even glance at other stuff. You would have needed the friendliest, nosiest Midwestern dad to strike up a conversation on the elevator ride to even possibly get close to cracking that. Story 36. I am 100% sure that people are capable of changing, but only when they truly want to. You can offer support and encouragement, but no one changes unless the drive comes from within. I cannot prove it with data, but I have seen it in real life many times. The shift often happens quietly, then suddenly becomes clear to everyone else. It is one of those truths that feels certain without needing hard evidence. Story 37. That actual wealthy people don't give a fudge about poor people as a human being. They see us as a nuisance or a way to use us to make money by paying as little as possible. I also believe this has always been the case and will never change. Human beings are the worst species to ever inhabit the earth. Story 38. Aliens are in our same space-time, but don't interact with us BC. We're the trailer park trash of the universe. Story 39. 90 of the people in my neighborhood can't a parallel park for shoot. I'd be able to prove it with pictures, but it'd be a waste of time. Nothing will really make the situation better. Story 40. Did he eliminate Notorious B.I.G.? He had everything to gain from Biggie's passing. He was basically Biggie's little meanie, and he disliked it. Biggie was assassinated in March of '97, and Diddy released his shoot tribute song, "I'll Be Missing You," 2 months later, and his career took off from there. Story 41. The entire world is conspiring in an elaborate and pointless gaslighting of me that cantaloupe tastes good. Story 42. That we are all components that make up a big being, and that being is the closest thing we have to a God. It only cares about us in terms of its own well-being and survival, is not tuned into the everyday moment struggles of our lives, and may not even be aware that we exist, just as we used to be ignorant about our own anatomy and physiology. In turn, some parts that make us up are sentient in ways we can't understand, and each of our bodies are a whole universe that they inhabit. It's turtles all the way up and all the way down. Story 43. In 100 Sure, my cat pays rent in another dimension because there's no other reason she disappears for 6 hours a day and comes back like nothing happened. Story 44. I could have 100 smell my tumor, though I didn't know what it was at the time. Nobody else could tell, but my body odor was different, and the smell is gone after surgery. But if I smell it again, I will know it's back. Story 45. That almost all animals communicate with each other. Even between species, they may not understand, like humans that speak different languages, but they get the gist of things through sound and body language. It kind of blows my mind. Damn list. I know it is smart or have rich internal lives. Story 46. In 2019, my town was experimented on by the government with some kind of weaponized pheromones. I lived near a military base at the time. One night, my wife and I both woke up at about 2 a.m. insane with desire and go out at each other in bed with an intensity we hadn't had in a decade. The next day, I mentioned I'm worn out to a coworker, and he says him too. He and his wife went at it pretty good last night. Weird because we're not a do-it-in-the-middle-of-the-night couple, but they lived about a quarter mile from us. My wife was on a walk the next afternoon with a neighbor who alluded to the same thing. Spontaneous, intense, middle-of-the-night intimacy. I think the military or one of its contractors tested something on our neighborhood or city that night. Story 47. There are men that piss in the strangest fudge ways. Ever go to the men's urinals and see piss on the floor? Exactly underneath the urinal? Are they pissing straight downwards? Answer, are you female? Because every male on the planet can explain this to you. Sometimes piss just doesn't go where you point it. I shoot you not. I've had the stream do a darn near 90-degree angle on exit. Aimed at the pot, pissed on the wall. Sometimes it does this thing where it splits into two streams, and the streams kind of cross in the center and splay out at the end. So not matter what you do, only one of the streams ends up in the toilet. And remember, we have zero muscular control past the external urethral sphincter. Once the piss is past that boundary, whatever ended up in the tubing, they is coming out of the tubing. And it's hard to close the sphincter back off once it's open too. Doesn't stop on a dime. We don't piss on the floor because we're assholes or fudge around. It's just not always as cut and dry a process as you might think it would be. What does make us assholes is when we don't clean it up. That's entirely on us. 3. Story 48. PETA is at least in part funded by the meat and dairy industry to perpetrate the crazy vegan stereotype. I've known a lot of vegans and not a single one had been preachy or pushy about it. Plus, PETA has eliminated tons of animals, which doesn't seem like something a real vegan would do. Story 49. This Epstein thing is bigger than just rich pedos. I think there was international political blackmail happening. Story 50. I'm 100 sure that pets understand us way more than we give them credit for. Dogs and cats know moods, energy, and even when you're thinking about leaving the house before you do. Science says it's observation, but it feels like a deeper connection that can't be measured. Anyone who's had a pet stare into their soul at just the right moment knows exactly what I mean. Story 51. That my father-in-law is a PDF. No way to prove it, and I dislike jumping to conclusions like that. Will I let him alone with my children? Absolutely the fudge not. Story 52. There absolutely did used to be a cornucopia in the Fruit of the Loom logo. I know what I fudge saw. I know what I saw. Story 53. There are no aliens or UFOs at Area 51. What's really there is toxic and nuclear waste. That's why they keep pushing the restricted areas further and further out. They're leaking, and it's getting worse. Story 54. That the NHL is rigged against Canadian teams in favor of trying to grow the game in the much larger U.S. market. Story 55. Musician Elliott Smith was taken down by his girlfriend. You're telling me that they were in the middle of a fight? She went to go shower, and then he stabbed himself multiple times in the chest? Nope. Story 56. Simulation theory and the religious God are the same theory in different time periods. We just explain them the best we can with what we know or believe at the time. Story 57. Science has been gamified and falls prey to modern capitalist problems. If your lab spends 2 years studying a thing and gets a bad result, you probably won't get funded again. Professors love their researchers and believe in the work. They're likely to manipulate things to look more promising and meaningful to keep the lab funded, employees paid, Research continuing. It's happening everywhere and explains the replication crisis. P-rigging is a huge problem. Story 58. I saw the future once, decades ago, but I've never been able to do it since. It was just like deja vu, but I saw what was going to happen a few seconds in the future. Like I was fast forwarding. Story 59. Everyone's walking around pretending they know what they're doing, but we're all just winging it and hoping nobody notices. Story 60. That the universe really is cyclical and rebirth is a real thing. The reason being that it is either a one-and-done universe, which is some sort of existential fart which had never occurred before and will never occur again, and living sentient existence is so close to zero, in probability it basically is zero, or this has all been happening for basically an infinite amount of time and is a cyclical universe, a kind of existential Mobius loop. And it wouldn't even matter how many universes from start to end it would take for you to precipitate again. It could be 100 quintillion universe lifetimes, because your continuity would just pick up where it last left off as a matter of informational cohesion when that configuration came about again. Like if your mind is an arrangement of neurons and states represented by, say, a box full of 1 trillion marbles and their own relative positions in the box and to each other, even if you died, box is shaken up randomly. The box will then get shook an infinite number of times, and eventually the marbles will be in the relative configuration of you, your mind state. And maybe the universe is so complex and infinite that only takes until next Tuesday. Story 61. The fentanyl crisis in America isn't just deliberate but manufactured by the Chinese government. The largest demographics to suffer from fentanyl addiction are also the largest ones to enlist in the military. If everyone is too addicted to fentanyl to join the military, there will be no one to help defend Taiwan. I thought this before 45 was elected though, so now I'm not entirely sure. Story 62. The alpha male content and the new feminist movement and alt-right content are propaganda sourced from outside the U.S. to cause divide in the U.S., and that many of the current online trends we see are also from the same source. I've seen way too many right-winged American talking points pop up exactly the same way, but in Turkish in Turkey. I'm positive that there is a huge campaign to cause division in countries with these topics, but I just can't prove it, and I'm almost positive it is Russia and not China. Story 63. I'm 100% sure that every person has at least one experience that has deeply shaped them, even if no one else will ever know about it. You can measure it or prove it, but it quietly guides decisions, fears, and joys in ways we don't always see. It's invisible yet undeniable in its effect. Story 64. Jeopardy was rigged with inferior competition, no cheating, to produce winners after the Mike Richards hiring firing as a distraction. 4 of the top 10 all-time winners came within a year of the incident. Story 65. Google Maps will purposely send you on a route that isn't the fastest because they want data from that road. Story 66. He's on that goddamn list. I know it in my bones. And in all of the accusations of the victims too, but also my bones. Story 67. That we only know a microscopic amount of what there is to know about the physics that govern the universe. And that what we currently know as law may turn out to be false under certain circumstances that we may eventually be able to exploit. Story 68. Trump's incompetence caused the pandemic. There was a CDC team in China whose job was to monitor for emerging viruses and train their Chinese counterparts how to do this job on their own. That team office was closed in 2017. Too many experts try to be fair and say, SARS-CoV-2 probably would have spread out of control even if that team was in place. I'm not willing to be as charitable. Those teams around the globe have done darn good work containing outbreaks. The China office never got their chance. Story 69. That menstrual cycles actually do sync, and specifically that alpha wombs exert a hormonal pull that affects other uteruses around them. Mine has pulled many into its orbit over the years. Close friends, obviously, but also a roommate whose cycle became regular and eventually synced to mine for the first time in her life while living with me, and even a coworker who hadn't had a period in years got one after a few months of working together. Answer: I think that there's a lot about the female body that we don't understand, care to research, but there is plenty of woo that has no scientific basis, especially with pregnancy, yet seems to work or be relevant anyways. There are a lot of old wives' tales and superstitions that are more valid than we give them credit for, and I have a hard time dismissing collective and generational knowledge completely when it comes to that stuff. Story 70. Branson, M.O. is the gate to hell. Everything I hear about that place irks me. They even let Jim Bakker set up a new ministry there. and then people attend it. Story 71. The technology exists these days for airport security to screen larger volumes of liquid, but airport vendors lobby the TSA to keep the rule in place so they can keep selling beverages post-security and extremely marked up prices. Story 72. The one where Adam Sandler makes pointless movies to help out his struggling friends financially? That's the kind of rich person I'd hope to be. Story 73. We are all connected in some way. When I help someone, I feel good. When I hurt someone, I feel bad. This was the start of my faith in something bigger than me, a higher power. I'll never fully understand it, but I try to a little more every day. I can choose to believe I'm a bunch of meat on a ball spinning around a star, or I can believe a little more is going on. My life has been a lot better since I switched to the second. Story 74. Google Maps will take you past businesses that pay Google, not the fastest route to your destination. Story 75. We are living in a simulation. 100 believe we may have lived more than once, but we just have our memories wiped and simulation reset. 20 believe. Deja vu? Ever just know something? Story 76. Bernie Sanders easily wins the 2020 primaries and ultimately the election if the DNC had not freaked out and made hundreds of secret phone calls after his Nevada win. Story 77. The elites are the ones that are causing division in society to distract us from they gaining more power and influence with our elected officials. Story 78. Camaro, fit to be. All job listings on all job sites are all ghost listings, aka fake listings, just for the sake of fulfilling legal obligations, even though they already have an internal candidate, considering I literally get rejected within half to 1 day with a standard templated response of, after careful consideration, or at most, no callbacks. That was taken down by his girl. That was taken down by his girl. That was taken down by his girl. Vicious meme here. Story 79. Partisan politics is mostly a smoke show. The people with the real power, the ones we don't know about, that operate behind the scenes, that finance campaigns like it's chump change, that shape policies for their own benefit, would never leave government leadership in the hands of a random outcome like one day of voting. I want to think that people like AOC and Bernie are the exceptions to the rule, which is why they are mediatically disliked across the board but loved by the general public. Coincidence? Story 80. The existence of alien life. It seems as wildly unlikely to not be true as most things I consider verifiable truth. Story 81. The government makes up conspiracy theories about the government to distract us from what they're really hiding and to discredit real whistleblowers as just more crazies. Story 82. I believe I know who took down my grandmother. It's been a cold case for 34 years now. I believe it was her boss, who was also her landlord. He had access to her home, where she was tacked down in the middle of the night by someone who let themselves in. I believe he snuck in, tried to have intimacy with her, and when she refused and got angry, he eliminated her to prevent his reputation being ruined. He was a high-powered attorney in my hometown and knew how to protect himself in a takedown investigation. She was strangled with pantyhose made of a fabric that wouldn't hold fingerprints. He was there the next morning, and in all of the crime scene photos, so when the trial started, the judge said any of his prints or hair found at the scene couldn't be used because there was evidence that the police let him inside the crime scene, and it couldn't be proved that he didn't leave the prints during that time. He also led a deposition against another suspect, which is a very odd thing to have another potential suspect do. He had also previously assaulted my grandmother on my father's side, but she never reported it. He also owned an apartment complex, and another woman awoke one night to find him sitting at the foot of her bed. She promptly moved out. I think his status as a wealthy attorney and his understanding of the legal system allowed him to get away with many predatory crimes. But I have no way of proving it was him. Story 83. There is no God as Rashurj. After all, it's near impossible to prove a negative till we search absolutely everywhere. It's practically unfalsifiable when they bring in divinity's invisibility to non-believers. Story 84. I am 100% certain that neurodivergence, autism, and ADHD in particular is genetic. I have been diagnosed with ADHD and suspect that I'm also autistic. 100 of my children have been diagnosed with ADHD. My dad is one of 5, and after a family funeral a few weeks ago, where 30 people sat around awkwardly attempting to make small talk at various volume levels with little to no eye contact, and lots of discussion about the uncle who was just like that. My mom died a couple years ago, And after she died, I realized that she was autistic, and all the signs of a woman with autism were there. I can't prove it myself because none of these people are officially diagnosed. What's the point of grown adults in their 60s and 70s seeking a diagnosis in this political climate? Story 85. Getting political here. If you don't like it, move on. Trump wasn't shot. It was all a ploy. There is so much evidence, but MAGA won't ever believe that because anything they don't like is liberal brainwashing. Trump also did not win the 2024 election. Story 86. That somewhere in the universe there is a planet with plants only, a garden planet. No animals, no human-like creatures. The only life that exists there is plants, and it's really beautiful, and no human being will ever see it. I believe in God, and based on how beautiful coral reefs in the universe is, which took a lot of human effort and technology to get to see, I see no reason why there shouldn't also be immense beauty out there that we'll never get to see. Story 87. That there is some sort of supreme being, aka God. Not religious, but spiritual. An old roommate called me a non-practicing Unitarian. Story 88. I'm 100% sure that between the hiring and firing of countless people, departments, and projects, that Trump will be leaving office with kabillions more than we'll ever know about. Story 89. Trump didn't get shot in the ear. He got a splinter. And the way the Secret Service allowed him to be visible to the crowds and photographers is super suspect. Story 90. The Rand Corporation, in conjunction with the saucer people, under the supervision of the reverse vampires, are forcing our parents to go to bed early in a fiendish plot to eliminate the meal of dinner. Story 91. People say that pet reptiles can't feel love, connection like dogs and cats can. But how do they know? I feel like it's possible. Story 92. People's energy can continue to linger in their long-term possessions homes. I don't necessarily think this is supernatural. I believe there's a scientific explanation for this, and we just haven't discovered it yet. But when you walk into an antique shop, you can feel the intense energy of all the things that have been living in people's houses for decades and decades and decades. It always gives me vertigo a little bit. I can feel it in really old places as well. Answer. Not exactly the same thing, but the underlying idea is similar to any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic by Arthur C. Clarke. The idea of ghosts or energy from things like you mentioned, it's just something we don't understand yet, so it's written off as supernatural and fake, etc. Maybe on a quantum level, those energies are there and reverberate through time, and as such reverberate longer and more intensely the longer the person was in or around the thing. Story 93. God, if there is a God, doesn't give a shoot about humans. God wants the whales to come back to dry land and conquer. Story 94. That pets understand way more of our words and moods than science currently credits them for. They just choose when it's convenient to let us notice. Story 95. The fact that we're not the only living, intelligent beings in the universe, it's infinitely large. Chances of us being the only planet with life out there is not zero. It's decently high, actually. We haven't even fully explored all the planets in our own solar system, let alone other ones. No way in hell we're the only ones. Story 96. The handbag industry is working with the pants industry. There's no other reason why women have such small pockets on pants compared to men. It's all a scam to make us buy bags. Story 97. I've delivered multiple messages from people who have passed on with serious accuracy. And I've spoken to spirits attached to buildings that told me how they passed on. Then I looked up the history of the building because I always think I'm just imagining it, just to find out that what I heard was true. Once I passed by a building and I saw some people in the window that felt off, I heard them and asked how they passed. They said they all passed in a big fire. I thought I was crazy, but when I looked it up, the building that was originally a hotel but became a low-income housing complex around the 1970s, 80s, but a big fire took out a huge part of the building. Later on, they renovated and turned the building back into a hotel. Can't prove any of it, and I would agree with anyone who thinks I'm crazy if I hadn't fact-checked Make Life of Average ended up being right. Story 98. That Costco intentionally makes their end-of-year rebate checks look like junk mail, so people throw them away. Story 99. My small steak conspiracy here in Scotland is that the bakers have colluded to make sure there is no steak pies left in the ovens at lunchtime, as they make more money off the lesser pies, minced chicken macaroni, etc. And they won't restock the steak pies as they want to sell the lesser pies so they can justify having all the other ones they have on display because it looks better. Story 100. There are way more neurodivergent people in the world than it is perceived in mainstream. It's just that majority of us diagnosed with ADHD, we are more passable as neurotypicals. Story 101. There has to be another intelligent civilization out in the universe. Perhaps another galaxy, another neighborhood cluster. Just doesn't make any sense for humanity to be that special. Story 102. Those yellow and black Jesus Saves signs up really high on polls. They seems to be some secret messaging. Also, the sign turns up in crowd pictures. At the strangest places include Jan 6 right up front. The demonstrations in Charlotte for George Floyd right up front. I've noticed them in most crowd shots. It's a flag, not an innocent sign. It's a locator. Story 103. Disney's in-house TV shows are a money laundering scheme. I refuse to believe Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief legitimately cost $12-15 million an episode. Most of it takes place in the woods, with actors young and unknown enough to be paid $50 in a bag of Skittles. Story 104. Most countries could replace their governments with some kind of AI and become multiple times more efficient, save budget, destroy corruption and corporations lobby, and actually make life of average person better. Story 105. That gods aren't real and religion is nothing more than a way to control people and an excuse to be disliked towards certain people. Story 106. I'm 100 sure that animals, especially dogs, can sense human emotions far more deeply than we currently understand, even though we can't fully prove it scientifically. Story 107. Millions of cures or treatments are held back because pharmas want to continue to sell their meds at the highest price. Story 108. This is a mild conspiracy theory. It is well known that Walmart squeezes their suppliers on price so that they can lower the retail price. So my theory is that the suppliers, manufacturers send slightly substandard product to WM. Nothing unsafe or anything. I'm talking about things like minor packaging errors or issues, something that normally they'd want to discard. Story 109. That religion at best masks and is perpetuated by mental illness. At worst, it encourages or even produces mental illness in healthy people. Story 110. These will sound like jokes, but I swear. The bug revolution, a theory I came up with as a 6-year-old that one day all of the bugs, insects, arachnids, etc. around the world will realize they outnumber us and will take over and eliminate us. All ventriloquist dummies know that I know they're all alive, but know that I won't tell a soul because I'm a baby punk, and I'm hella scared of them. Story 111. There's no such thing as an infinity that is bigger than another. There are only infinities that are countable and uncountable. Cantor's diagonal argument can be applied to integers as well, and any infinite set that includes numbers in between integers, theorem 1, 1.5, 2, only approaching from the fridge that it doesn't reach a larger number of infinite terms. Story 112. Donald Trump is 100, a Russian asset. His administration has removed protections against spying, and he has likely sold hundreds of millions of dollars worth of government classified documents and intelligence. Story 113. Men are the weaker intimacy from gestation to passing. I could look up all the studies that have been done to prove this, but I'm too tired. Story 114. The lost city of Atlantis is in Mauritania, specifically the Rishat structure, aka Eye of the Sahara. Answer. The thing about it is, even if it's not true, it's still a region that has gone almost entirely unassessed by archaeologists. Will we find Atlantis there? Honestly, probably not, though I admit the way the Platonic narrative seems to match the Risha structure is very compelling. But we'll find something if we go poking around there. That's win-win. There's no good reason not to fund that expedition. Use Atlantis as a selling point. Why not? It's a charismatic idea that's easier to sell than some random archaeological fishing expedition. Story 115. Or 911 happened on 911 because they were trying to send a message of nothing is safe, and 911 is the emergency number in the U.S. Everyone laughs at me for this theory, but I can understand what's so stupid about it. If there is a reason why it's stupid LMK, because nobody has provided me with one that made sense. Story 116. NFL officials, refs, in the long game by hosting are secretly favoring the Chiefs, Packers, and Steelers. Story 117. Paul Wellstone was assassinated by Republican operatives. The timing was just too suspicious, and there were too many irregularities in the investigation. Story 118. Every morning I'd say, "I love you, Dirt T," to my cat. And one morning the cat said, "I love you, plain as day." It was a trip, but thrilling too. I told her I loved her too. It happened several times after that. If you talk to your cat or dog, whatever, in human talk, a lot, they apparently learn the words. And it could be the tone of your voice, the words they want to pick up. I'd rather live with an animal. Story 119. Story 120. Baby clothing companies deliberately stop making multi-packs of identical socks because they know how easily babies lose them, and it makes parents buy more socks if they can't match up the remaining ones. Story 121. Epstein isn't dead people like that. Don't just commit tragic end, is alive and well partying with minors on another island. Story 122. That everyone in the world has a psychiatric disorder. The difference is some know and treat, others know and don't treat, and there are those who deny it. This means that the world is nothing more than a madhouse. Among these disorders, some are unanimous. Everyone has depression and anxiety, some other disorder, which shows that no one is really normal. In other words, there is no normal. Story 123. There is more to this universe than the physical. IDK, if we are in a simulation or another dimension, but there is something going on out here that we cannot readily detect, and there is something beyond this lifts. Story 124. It was a softball game in the late 80s. I slid into home. I was safe but was called out. Travesty, I tell you. Story 125. Casinos are playing the long game by hosting family-friendly events like concerts and fireworks, having arcades and movie theaters, etc., in hopes that children will grow up and think, you know what used to be a lot of fun when I was a kid? Going to the casino. We should check it out. Maybe play a few slots. Story 126. People who constantly repeat how confident they are actually the most insecure, and trying to convince themselves and others they are the opposite. Story 127. That my ex-partner cheated on me. I had no concrete proof but her excuses. Stories just never seem to add up, while simultaneously making the tiniest bit of sense where I'd obviously have to trust her. She was extremely tech-savvy, so trying to find any info on her devices, she allowed me to, turned up nothing. Quite frequently, there was food missing from the fridge that she wouldn't eat, vegetarian, that I had been saving. Only after a business trip or conference, I'd find it was gone. She made excuse after excuse to not join me at these conferences, one of which was an award ceremony where I achieved 2. And when she had her own work dues, I was not permitted by the company. No clue to go. Pretty sure I found some underwear that was neither mine or hers. She claimed it could belong to her sister, except it was at least 2 sizes too small. So far removed from any clothes I had style-wise, and she went commando all the time. If it wasn't a consistent AP, I think it might have been a intimacy workers. I found money randomly on the bed a few times. Neither her nor I carried around cash enough for it to fly out one of our purses to land on the bed. I probably sound skits as fudge or an Lomo. Story 128. That no world religion is correct. If there is something divine, it is not simile to any of these man-made myths, and it sure as hell does not micromanage us. Story 129. There is insanely high amount of neurodivergent population in Japan, and they just will take over, diagnose it, and turn a blind eye to it because of stigma.